Next we have Ms. Suzanne Scholte, the president of the North Korea Freedom Coalition, to speak with us. She is also the vice chairman of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. And if the one-way team could be ready to come on stage after she speaks.
Okay. You guys ready to stay? Thank you, Jessica. I know you guys are hot, and I know you've been standing out here for over an hour now, listening to these speeches. So, but I do want to make a couple of. I think I'm the last speaker. I do want to make a couple of really important points. First of all, I just want to thank the Korean Church Coalition for this tremendous effort they've put together year after year. But these 2 days, it's so very important what you guys are about to do, because there will not be any action on the North Korea human rights effort unless they hear your voices. So what you're doing this afternoon is so very important for the passage of the North Korea Human Rights Act, for the passage of the North Korea Refugee Adoption Act, but also for the congressional resolution calling on China to stop the repatriation of the North Korean refugees. Your voices are so important, because that's the only thing that's going to move these members from taking action. I want to say that we're really at a turning point right now. We have never seen so much attention being paid to this issue, and it's because of the relentless efforts of organizations like the Korean Church Coalition for North Korea Freedom. We see much more attention being paid in South Korea about the refugees and the orphan issue. We saw President Lee actually raise this issue with Hu Jintao for the first time. We're at a very critical stage in this, and we've got to keep the campaign relentlessly going forward until China reverses their policy. I want to mention, when I was in South Korea for North Korea Freedom Week recently, many of the defectors told me something that they have never said before, that they predict that the regime will collapse and within the next 3 years. So I want to tell you about two strongholds that we have to fight against, because these are two things that we hear repeatedly, this fear of regime collapse. The first is the cost to South Korea. You'll hear again and again, oh, if the North Korea regime collapses, it'll be a terrible burden on South Korea and the international community. The second thing we hear a lot is, if the North Korea regime collapses, South Korea, China will be flooded with refugees. I want to tell you that these are two great deceptions that discourage South Koreans and others in this campaign for North Korea human rights and freedom for taking more action. It suggests that we should allow the status quo of the Kim Jong-un regime to continue and allow the third-generation dictatorship to continue to enslave 23 million people. But I want to address these two strongholds. First of all, when people think of the cost of reunification, they only look at the cost, never the benefits. The benefits that will come from a united Korea far outweigh any costs. Look at the billions of food aid that's been given by the free world that was misappropriated by this regime that would be available to help rebuild North Korea. Look at the untapped natural resources in North Korea that the Chinese are trying to exploit. Imagine the savings alone in military expenditures that both South Korea and the United States make only because of the constant threats by the North Korea regime. But also think of this. Think of the greatest resource the North Koreans have, the people there. How quickly we all forget that Seoul was in ashes in 1953, that back then North Korea was the industrial economy. It was the economic power. South Korea was agrarian. But out of the ashes of the Korean War, the Korean people built the 11th largest economy in the world in a very short time. When economists talk about a united Korea, you can see the dollar signs in their eyes. This is why the communist regime in China has worked against South Korea, because they know this. But the reformers in China, the business leaders in China, know that a unified Korea would be an economic boon to China as well as the entire region. South Korea would no longer be an island. It would be connected and transformed, becoming a conduit for regional trade. Just imagine the train tracks running from Sinuiju to Busan and joining the Trans-Siberian Railroad to Europe. Now let's talk about the millions of refugees leaving North Korea. This is another wrong-headed notion, as you will see exactly the opposite occur. The problem will not be refugees leaving North Korea. The problem will be so many people trying to get to North Korea. Among those going home will be the North Korean defectors. Remember, they didn't flee because they wanted to leave North Korea. They fled because they were desperate. In addition to defectors going back, think of all the Korean Americans, some of you here today, who trace your roots back to North Korea. They'll be booking flights to go back to their ancestral homeland. There will also be the pastors and the priests, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Catholics, and the Baptists. Will be elbowing each other out to get there first to preach and plant their churches. And then think of the business folks, all the South Korean corporations like Hyundai and Samsung, the manufacturers, the mining companies, all sending their best and their brightest visionaries. Imagine the real estate and land speculators. So we're not going to need to worry when the regime collapses that refugees will be flowing out and becoming a burden on China or South Korea. What we're going to worry about is an orderly inflow of people trying to go into North Korea. I truly believe that God is answering our prayers, and that day of freedom for North Korea is going to happen very soon.
Yes!
I want to close by sharing a very brief story about Kim Ok-gyum, who's a North Korean defector who settled in South Korea. Because her family was starving, she'd gone to China to try to get food, but she was caught and repatriated back to North Korea. As you know, all North Koreans who are repatriated are subjected to torture and imprisonment. She felt very fortunate because she was imprisoned in a political prison camp where she worked outside as a farm laborer, so she had access to plants and bugs. I remember her telling me how she forced herself to eat grasshoppers because she knew they were full of protein, and she was so determined to survive that imprisonment to be reunited with her young son. When she was finally released from prison, she returned home only to find that her son had died from starvation. Her husband had divorced her because she was in a political prison camp. With no reason to stay in North Korea, she fled to China again, only to be caught and sent to a detention center. While in detention center, she met another mother who was crying because she had left her daughter behind in North Korea when she came to China in search for food. Mrs. Kim knew exactly what this woman was experiencing, so she helped her escape from that detention center. As a result, Mrs. Kim was brutally beaten to the point that she nearly became paralyzed. All North Korean defectors have a similar story, but Mrs. Kim's story has not ended, and it illustrates the power of God and the spirit of the North Korean people. She suffered greatly. Through her own suffering, she put her own life in danger to save another. She was beaten for this act of kindness and bravery. She escaped again, but she's triumphed over the evil of the North Korean regime to live in freedom in South Korea. She's become a Christian, and she's now a deacon in a defector church in Busan. To me, Mrs. Kim represents the indomitable spirit of the Korean people. So I encourage you today, we are indeed turning a corner. We are going to win this fight, so please continue your efforts until the refugees and orphans are saved and North Korea is free. And Chayubukan!
And Suzanne, all of us KCC pastors say that Suzanne is more Korean than us Koreans. She has led the fight for North Korea freedom for longer than anyone can remember. And all of us here today, thank you. Thank you. Shout for freedom! Shout for freedom! Shout for freedom!